and welcome to the strategic analysis video for the strategic case study for the May 2018 exam on media streaming service Couchweb. This is the penultimate video in our video series, and in this video we're going to look through some of the key strategic models from the strategic syllabus and apply them to the case study, so apply them to Couchweb. And I'm sure many of you have seen the case already, but just introduce it again. Essentially, what we are looking at in this case is an online media streaming company. We're looking at the online media streaming industry. Now, of course, this will be a case that is very familiar, or will be at least an industry that is very familiar for you. You may not have any real idea about how the industry works, the ins and outs of it, but I'm sure it's something that you have all used. It's something you've all been aware of. You've all used Hulu accounts or Netflix accounts, Amazon Prime accounts, etc. And the company in question, Couchweb, is very, very similar to the company of Netflix. It's a very successful public organization based in the fictional country of Mayland. So very good, very relatable company for us to look at. I'm sure we're all familiar with Netflix, we're all familiar with the online streaming industry, and so it will be an interesting one for us to analyze. And how we're going to do this is by using what's known as the Irrational Model. So essentially we are going to look at where we are now, and so that will be internal analysis, looking at what is good about Couchweb, what could be improved about Couchweb, etc. We'll also be looking at the business environment, so looking at the greater environment through PESTEL analysis, and also the internal environment, or as in the specific industry environment, looking at 5 forces, etc. We'll also look at where we want to be. What do Couchweb ultimately want to achieve? How are they going to get there? How are they going to measure their performance? How are they going to see how well they are meeting their mission, how well they are meeting their objectives? And finally, we'll look at how we are going to get there. So, of course, we'll know where we are. We know where we want to be. What we need to do is find out how we're going to get there, how we're going to get from one state of affairs to the other state of affairs. And we'll look at things such as generic strategies and source matrix and different methods of growth to do that. And we'll start off by looking at ultimately where the organization wants to be. What do Couchweb want to achieve? What is their goal? What is their mission? And the first thing that we will look at is the company's mission statement. Now, of course, we know from the preceding that the company's mission statement was always entertaining. Now, this is very short, very simple, very precise and to the point. But if we think about the properties of good mission statements using the Campbell mission statement, we need to think about other things. Should our mission statement be improved? Because a mission statement should reflect what an organization is about. Why does it exist? Who does it exist for? What are we trying to achieve? And of course, the term always entertaining doesn't really do this. It doesn't tell us much beyond what we're about. What we're about is to always be entertaining. But who are we entertaining? Why are we entertaining them? What do we want to achieve through entertaining people, etc.? And the good thing about a mission statement is it provides a common purpose for the organization. So for the strategy, when we think about the directors, when we think about plans that they are creating, but also with regards to employees as well. It helps with goal congruence because we are all, in a sense, working towards the same objective, working towards providing the consumer with something. And that's the real value, the real purpose in a mission statement. And I referred to the Campbell mission statement a minute ago, and essentially what that is composed of is 4 different elements, and that's the purpose of the organization, the strategy, the values, and the policies. Now, purpose is more what you would think when you think of a mission statement. It's why does the organization exist? Why do we do what we do? What are we trying to achieve? So it could be to provide entertainment for everyone. And if you look at the vision statements of the organization, actually broke down some of these things a bit more than the mission statement did, where we wanted to provide an opportunity for perhaps lesser known studios, lesser known artists to portray themselves, to express themselves, to give them an audience, to be the leading producer of online entertainment, to be the leading producer of quality content, etc. That was the reason why we existed. Then the strategy would be, how will the organization compete? What do we do to ensure that we meet our mission statement? What do we do to ensure that we are always entertaining, that we are providing the best quality entertainment? So are we competing to try and be the biggest or to try and be the best? Are they the same thing or are they different things? Of course, we know from looking through the pre-scene that ultimately what the organization wants to achieve is A, to be the biggest, but also to provide the best high quality content. And that's why it's investing so much money in its own original programming. Values are what the organization stands for. So quality, value for money, innovation, these are three things that came out in the case. So quality, the founders mentioned that the whole purpose of the company, or the thing that's going to keep subscribers coming to the organization, is the quality of the content. And that ultimately is what keeps subscribers. It's all about that. If you think about other ways in which they compete, perhaps lowering their prices, having a more innovative approach in terms of the layout of the website, etc., these are all beneficial things. These will all help subscribers, they'll all add value to subscribers, but ultimately if the quality of the programming is not there, they will leave. And of course, as there is no subscription fee, or there is a subscription fee, but there's no long-term subscription, there is no penalty cost, they can leave and cancel their account as and when they want. It's very easy for them to simply cancel their Couchweb account and get an account at a competitor, and therefore it's important that the quality is high. We also value for money because, of course, we want to reach the maximum amount of people. So we're operating in a very much a low value, high volume way because, of course, we need to get millions of subscribers. We have millions of subscribers, and therefore we're actually getting a lot of money simply by having a very low cost. And if we put the cost too high, people will start to look elsewhere because, of course, they can get a lot of these other facilities, they can get a lot of these programs on through other means, through home video, through Movie Master, etc. And so we need to keep the value for money there because that is something that subscribers have valued. That's what has been said in the pre-scene as well. It mentioned that at the current $12 a month, it's considered to be good value. And innovation was also a critical factor for the organization as well, and something the founders repeatedly mentioned. So again, we're not really expressing that we are about quality, that we are about value for money, that we are about innovation in our mission statement. The mission statement, always entertaining, doesn't highlight quality. No indication that we provide the highest quality material. We're not providing them with a good value for money service, with an innovative, good value, quality service. Things like that would help improve the mission statement. It's not actually a very fair representation of what they are trying to achieve at the moment. And finally, policies, which essentially is what people within the organization are expected to do. So in a sense, the policies are a holistic overview of the purpose, values, and strategies with regards to how people act. If you think of certain companies where they have their own mantras that are given to employees that are in offices, etc. For example, Johnson & Johnson has their credo, which is 4 paragraphs or so of information about what they value and how they expect people to behave. That's all part of building a good culture, part of building goal congruence towards your ultimate goal, towards your ultimate objective. Again, no evidence that this is going on at the organization, at Couchweb. And so there is something in that. There is something that they could possibly learn, possibly something that they could improve on. So now on to performance measurement. Of course, it's all good, all well and good having an objective, having something that you want to achieve, but unless you monitor, unless you have accurate metrics metrics that you've decided upon that are going to reflect how much progress you're making towards meeting those objectives, it's not going to be of any real use. And so, of course, we can use the balanced scorecard, which is a very appropriate way of monitoring a company's performance as a whole, because it breaks things down into 4 different perspectives. Of course, you have the financial perspective. Finance not as important in the modern business environment as perhaps it was in the past, because people have realized that there's far more that a company can be judged on, far more that is important to a company's success than just whether it's making money or not. But it's still very important, because that's ultimately the reason for a for-profit company existing. That's the reason for, or the ability for it to continue. If it wasn't going to make any money, if it was making a loss, eventually it wouldn't be able to continue. It's internal perspective, so how well they are performing their internal operations, how effective, how efficient they are. The learning and growth perspective, which is all about future sustainability, future success. And also the customer's perspective, because any for-profit business that relies on consumers, relies on customers, ultimately needs those customers. And therefore, if things happen and those customers leave, if they move on to a competitor, that's going to have an effect on all the other perspectives over time. So let's take a look at each of these individually now. So of course we have the profit. Profit always important, particularly for a company like Couchweb with shareholders who are going to want a return on their investment. Return on investment, this is useful for both investors when they want to invest in the company, but also return on investment for the organization when it's perhaps looking at creating new shows, when it's undertaking new projects. It needs to carry out an assessment to see if that particular project, the completion of that project, the completion of the production of that show, etc., is going to add value to the organization, because ultimately that will affect how much profit it makes and how much it can return to the shareholders. Monitoring cash flow is critical, particularly given that we're going to have lots of monthly expenses that have to be paid regardless. And of course, if we are paying monthly expenses and we're not getting our actual revenue as consistently, perhaps there are times of year when more people are signed up than other years or other months, and therefore we're going to have more money coming in different months. Our bills are still going to be very similar, so things like wages, things like investment in shows are going to happen regardless of the current revenue, and so we have to have sufficient cash flow to pay for day-to-day expenses. And it ties in with gearing ratios as well, which looks at how much debt is running through the organization. The more debt running through the organization, the riskier it looks to investors, and also the harder we'll find to raise additional debt financing. Internal perspective can mean many different things. I've listed a few things here, such as how effectively we are using our employees. Obviously, we've got a lot of coders and IT professionals. We need to make sure we're getting the most out of them, because they are quite expensive, they command quite high salaries, and so we need to make the best possible use of them. On-time job completion and job success rates, completing them under budget, etc. This could be related to the original programs that we are producing. It could be to do with getting a new original program out onto the Couchweb system, and so on. Obviously, the more quickly we can do that, the more quickly then people can start watching it, the more revenue we'll make, the more money we'll make, etc. Employee satisfaction, very important. It was mentioned as a risk in the pre-scene with regards to utilization of technology, that we have very skilled, very clever staff members, and as a result, they are always under the threat of being headhunted by other organizations because they're in quite short supply, and all the companies in our industry want those sorts of people, particularly as we are the market leader. So keeping our employees satisfied is a very good metric, because we rely on the consistency of our employee force or workforce in order to achieve our goals. And also investment in IT was mentioned as a critical factor in the organization, that they were always looking to innovate, always looking to bring in new tech innovations, which also extends here, as you can see, onto the learning and growth side. And so the amount of money we spend in investment, the amount of money we spend in research and development is very important to the organization. And so if internal perspective is the input, some of these on the learning perspective are the output. So the number of projects completed, the number of new innovations, the number of new shows. That was another big thing in the pre-scene, was the increased investment, the increased development of the own shows that they produce, their own shows that they are being produced under the Couchweb name rather than going to Ron Steele Productions or Magic Media, etc. And so If that is part of the overall goal and strategy of the organization, then the amount of shows, the success of those shows will be a reasonable metric to use, because ultimately they want to produce more and more of their own programs, want to have more creative control over it, and so on. Finally, on to customer perspective. So customer perspective will be subscribers in this instance, the amount of people who have signed up to Couchweb accounts. And so easy ways to measure that will be simply things like the number of customers, the number of repeat customers. What I mean by that is by looking at perhaps the amount of months on average that a customer stays signed up. Ultimately, we want them to sign up and just be a customer from there on out, just paying their $12 a month every month. And we can perhaps look at ways of improving that if it perhaps doesn't reach the rate that we want. Perhaps we want to say we want 90% of all customers to just be repeat customers, to just keep their accounts open all the time. Perhaps we'll look at the amount of people that don't discontinue their account after the free trial. If you look at companies like Netflix, they always offer a free month. And then if you cancel your account within that month, you don't become a customer. If you don't cancel it, then you do become a customer. So perhaps aim to have a 90% or more of people who sign up and then don't deactivate after the free period. And ways in which we can improve, if that isn't as high, is by looking at the number of complaints, maybe over the functionality of the website, the functionality of the applications that are used on devices, or just the the quality of the content or the quantity of the content. What shows do we not have that people are looking for? What kinds of shows do people want on this particular website, on the Couchweb website, that we are not providing? So the next section relates to governance. I'll briefly give you an overview of the theory of governance before going on to the specific parts related to the case. So essentially, governance is the way in which organizations are directed, administered, and controlled, with the aim of ensuring that the organization is run in a way that is right for all stakeholders. So essentially, ensuring that a business is run to benefit the stakeholders and society as a whole. So, sounds very good. And it's worth noting that this is only applicable to UK companies and listed companies at that, companies that trade on the stock exchange. But that's not to say that there aren't things that we can take from this and apply to any organization. It doesn't matter where that organization is based. Just as in our case, it's not based in the UK. And it doesn't even matter if the company isn't listed, because of course it's all about running the business in the best possible way. So just because you don't have to do it doesn't mean that you couldn't gain from it. Let's take a look at some of the few key factors from the Code of Governance. What is considered good governance? And that's having a separate chairman and CEO. Of course, the CEO is head of the organization, and the board is ahead of the CEO. And so the CEO runs the organization on behalf of the board, and then the chairman is the head of the board. So if you had a situation where the same person was the chairman and the CEO, they might be setting themselves targets they know they'll be able to achieve. So they're not pushing the company, trying to get the most out of the company, trying to achieve its potential. The chairman is just setting themselves easy targets that they know they'll be able to achieve so they can get their bonuses. Independent non-executive directors. These are people who are not employed by the organization. They sit on the board to, in a sense, act as the control for the executive directors, to ensure that the executive directors are running the organization in a way that is beneficial for stakeholders and not for themselves. This, of course, it goes some way to removing the issues caused with the agency problem. Now, agency problem is essentially where directors are running the organization on behalf of the shareholders. Now, the shareholders own the company, the directors don't, but the directors are in charge of the company. So the directors perhaps aren't necessarily interested in the long-term viability of the organization. They perhaps are more interested in their short-term gains. So they may leverage long-term sustainability, long-term growth for short-term short successes, small successes, so that they can boost the share price of the organization, so that they can boost the dividends paid out to the shareholders and get their bonuses and move on. And so that's the point of the non-executive directors. Non-executive directors also need to be people who are skilled, knowledgeable, not just any old person. They need to know whether what the executive directors are doing is right or wrong, and they have to be firm as well. There's a tendency for independent NEDs to not rock the boat because they're paid quite a handsome stipend for doing it. It's only a few days a year job, and so a lot of them don't bother doing it, or don't bother sort of standing up, rocking the boat, where of course they have to. That is their job. And one of the main jobs for the NEDs is to sit on the Audit, Nomination and Remuneration Committees. Now, these are 3 different committees that, in a sense, are the essence of what governance is, ensuring that everything is done fairly and ethically. That's the Audit Committee, ensuring that executive directors are not using company funds to fund business trips and golf trips that the shareholders wouldn't approve of. For example, if an executive director is taking a client to Dubai for 2 weeks to discuss a business opportunity on the company's dime in a 5-star hotel, well, it could have just been a couple of hours meeting at the company's office. That would have been enough. Yet they chose to go on holiday for 2 weeks in a 5-star hotel. That's not an effective, efficient, correct use of company money, and that's the kind of thing that the Audit Committee is responsible for stopping. The Nomination Committee are in charge of selecting people to sit on the board, selecting the executive directors. And this is to ensure that the chairman or the CEO doesn't simply bring their son or their daughter or their husband or their wife on board to the company to earn extra money for the family, to give them an opportunity. No, it needs to be someone who is right for the job, someone who is experienced, someone who has knowledge in the industry, and generally someone who is not related to other members of the board, because this of course affects their independence, this affects their ability to think, and perhaps increase the chance of them being biased. And remuneration committees as well. These are the committee, this is the committee responsible for deciding the pay on the directors. And this is because directors' pay and the list of directors has to be disclosed to the public, and so of course it's important to come across with to come out with a fair level of payment. If the company that you work for is not doing so well, it made X million in losses and it's got to lay off employees, but then it's also found out that the director had a £40 million bonus this year, which was a 20% increase on last year's, then people are going to think, well, why? Why is that director getting a bonus, a raise, when the company has done worse this year than it did last year? The company didn't meet any of its targets. It was supposed to be trying to break even this year, and it made millions in losses, yet you've given the director a bigger bonus than you even did last year. That's the kind of thing that will really frustrate the public, turn the public against the organisation, turn the shareholders against the organisation, turn the other stakeholders, such as the employees, against the organisation. And that is what governance tries to overcome. It's also worth pointing out that governance has a risk management focus, particularly with regards to the Audit Committee. So the Audit Committee is often in charge of creating things like risk registers and other things like that ensure that risks are being dealt with. Because it's one thing to identify risks, it's another to actively go about mitigating the impact of those risks. And that's one of the values of corporate governance. Financial reporting and control. Also very important, ensuring that all the statements are done as per the laws of the particular country in which the organisation operates in. Ensuring that directors have all the information they need, because of course they can't really be judged on their decision making if they aren't given the amount of information given. So this system is to ensure that all executive directors are provided with all the information that they need to facilitate good decision making. And with regards to decision making, that all directors are involved in it. And this means even if it means taking, something as simple as a show of hands, just ensuring that everyone is involved. Often, in certain situations, if you've got, say, founders of the company still sitting on the board, the founders are very powerful. Everyone agrees with what the founder says. And that's against governance. The whole point of a board is that there is a consensus amongst a group of people rather than one person making all the decisions. So if that isn't happening, if one person or two people or half the board are far too powerful, then that goes against the point of a board and thus against the point of good corporate governance. And regular meetings with both institutional shareholders and all shareholders at the annual general meeting. Institutional shareholders, of course, being things like your pension schemes and your big stakeholders, big shareholders like that. And it's important that we do this because of the fact that they have a lot of money invested within the organisation. If they were to take their money out of the organisation, it could cause a lot of problems with the market because the share price might drop, as people may be thinking that there's something wrong with the organisation or it's on the decline because this major institutional shareholder has decided to take their money out of it. So applying that section on governance to the case, we can see a few things. For starters, it's unlikely that there are many conflict of interest that would occur, at least based on the information. In previous case studies where conflicts of interest have occurred or are likely to occur, it's always been issues with non-executive directors or executive directors who happen to also have holdings in other companies that are directly related to it. So in this instance, it would perhaps if one of the non-executive directors or one of the other executive directors would, in a sense, be involved with a production company. And they're constantly trying to stop Couchweb from producing its own programs, trying to argue that it's cheaper to just get programs from this particular production company that they happen to be a shareholder in. There is the potential for the agency problem, but only a bit of a potential problem because of the fact that the founders are still running the organization. Founders are likely to have shareholding still, and it's their baby, it's their company. They're not going to want to do anything that jeopardizes the business. There's not a huge issue. If there was a huge issue, I'd make more of a deal of it. Perhaps if there were people that weren't involved in the organization at all who were running it, because then sometimes you can have an issue where you have directors who are running it for short-term profit to get their bonuses before they move on, rather than looking at long-term sustainability. A few other things here. They have 3 non-executive directors and the chairperson, now all very qualified, very experienced, so it's not such an issue about bringing wider experience to the board, but they have 5 executive directors, so ideally they should have 4 non-executive directors plus the chairperson, and that would bring wider experience to the board and allow for more effective reviews of the board, because then we have an even amount. We have more executive directors at the moment, so if there's ever a vote or anything like that, then perhaps the non-executive directors cannot overturn the executive directors. It's also unusual in a case where there was so much information about the board to not have any mention of which non-executive directors were involved in the remuneration. So that's obviously the salaries for the executive directors, nomination, that's appointing executive directors, and audit committees. And if they don't have this, then it's very poor governance on this part and a weakness of the organisation as a whole, particularly with regards to audit committees, because audit committees are in charge of ensuring that everything is done above board, everything is managed, the risks are effectively managed. They could do with more formal reviews of risks. All they had was a risk report that actually didn't touch on many things at all. If those of you who watched the preceding video series will have seen my video on the risk section where they had 5 risks and we added far more than that on top of it. So the fact that they haven't covered all the risks that are quite clear to the organization is poor, in a sense that risk management is a critical part of running a business, running a large business, and it's a critical part of the CIMA syllabus. P3 is mainly about risk management, and so the fact that they don't do effective risk management, or the fact that they could improve on their risk management, is a big issue. It's a likely exam issue. Finally, there was no mention of the annual general meeting as well. And now with tech companies, often they have more than one meeting per year because of the fast-paced nature of the industry, because of the rate in which shares change hands, etc. And yet there was no mention of it at all. And of course they have to have one. If they don't have one, that's very, very poor governance. That's very, very poor shareholder management. Shareholders, of course, being key stakeholders. And of course, something that is likely to upset the shareholders. And that, of course, is not going to be good for the long-term sustainability of the organization. If the shares keep moving hands, it's going to affect the share price, and that may ultimately cause issues in the long run, particularly with regards to equity financing. So I hope you've enjoyed this sample video and more importantly found it useful. Before I go, I'd like to quickly tell you about a few of the products that we do here at Astranti Financial Training. Specifically for our case study courses. We have a study text which details all the key theories in which you will be expected to use in your case study exam, as well as details of how to approach the pre-scene and the case study. We also have a series of course videos detailing how to answer case study questions. This is actually an area in which many students struggle. Most of the scripts that I've seen, the failing scripts that I've seen, has actually been due to poor case study technique rather than lack of knowledge. We also have a series of pre-scene analysis videos based on the current up-to-date pre-scene, detailing all the key bits of information and likely issues you may face in the exam. Next up is the industry analysis, a pack detailing information about the industry that the pre-scene company resides in, information about the key players within that industry, and more background information on the industry in general. We also have a range of mock exams created for each level and based on the current pre-scene, which is a great way to get some practice in before you sit the real thing. We also offer marking and feedback on those mock exams, so you can see where you are going wrong and where you can improve. Finally, we have the master classes. These are 2 one-day classes taken by our expert tutors to give you all the hints and tips you need to really add to your chances of passing the exam. Also, if you take our full course, we offer a pass guarantee, which, provided you have met all the requirements of the pass guarantee, you will get a free resit on the next exam should you fail to pass. So once again, thank you for your time. If you're interested in any of these products, please visit the website www.astranti.com for more information. Thank you.